In the final moments of his life, J Dilla was still doing what he'd always done, making beats. Anywhere, anytime, and with whatever gear he had. From his LA home to his hospital bed, he created what would become one of the most iconic albums in hip-hop, Donuts.
To me, he's sort of the Michael Jordan of hip-hop.
JD is one of the best producers to ever touch it.
Dilla is one of the greatest artists of the 20th century.
This is the story of J Dilla, a quiet genius from Detroit who reshaped hip-hop without ever shouting about it. In this video, we're going to be digging into Dilla's life, how Donuts came together, and what producers can take from his approach to music. So James "Do It" Yancey was born in 1974 in Detroit's Conant Gardens. He was the eldest of four, raised in a household where music wasn't just in the background, it was in his blood.
We knew at a couple months old that he had a keen ear. He couldn't talk, but he could match vocal sounds.
His ear was already exceptional, and it's no surprise given the house he grew up in. His father, Beverly Yancey, was a jazz bassist who co-wrote the Spinners' It's a Shame, and his mother, Ma Jukes, was a classically trained singer and teacher.
Like my father used to take me every week and buy me a 45 7-inch record. That's how I started. So I was actually doing parties at the age of 5, 6 with the help of my older sister.
He grew up on soul, jazz and funk, but it was when a new genre of music started creeping into his life that everything changed.
My older sister had a boyfriend who was a DJ. So that's how I got into being interested in two turntables and so forth, which led to beats. You know, just curiosity on how it was done and how beats were created.
And that moment lit a fuse for Dilla. From being around DJs, he started to see possibilities. What could happen if you chopped, flipped, or looped records in your own way?
I was on a tape deck. I was making beats on tape decks. I could just pause and record.
And he'd build new loops by hand, cutting, rewinding, timing everything by ear. It was around this time that Dilla met local Detroit legend Amp Fiddler, keyboardist for Parliament and Funkadelic. Amp had an MPC. He showed it to Dilla and something instantly clicked.
James said, yeah, I've been making beats with cassette tapes, and it was crazy. I was like, what? So I said, okay, tomorrow, bring all the samples and we're gonna put them in the MPC and I'll show you how we can start making the songs.
And that MPC wasn't just a faster way of making beats. It unlocked something new in Dilla and he took to it instantly. And his approach to beat making was almost ritualistic. According to Ma Dukes, he'd wake up at 7 a.m, clean the studio for 2 hours and listen to records front to back. Never skipping, always digging for something buried in the mix. And all of this happened in his basement studio, which was more than just a workspace. It was his sanctuary.
I went to Detroit. We went in the basement, and every wall, from floor to ceiling, was records, categorized. He was a scientist. Like, if you open his refrigerator, all the Coke cans were turned the same way. You know, everything was perfect.
So when he finally turned the sampler on, he wasn't searching, he was executing what he already knew.
I was in the middle of doing the Slum Village joint. They say we went platinum in the streets, or multi-platinum in the streets, because it was bootlegged.
It was around this time that Dilla formed a group with his friends T3 and Batin. All three of them had grown up in Conant Gardens, but didn't meet till they were teens.
I just heard about this guy who had beats. And back in that day, it was like, beats? Who making beats in Detroit, Michigan? And he went up there and played some of the illest joints I ever heard. I was like, wow, this guy's amazing.
They started recording in Dilla's basement, freestyling, bouncing ideas, laying verses over sketches. And they called the group Slum Village. And the setup at that time was pretty bare bones.
We record part of it on headphone mics because we had 2 mics and then we had to do part of it straight to DAT. That means 1 takes. That means if you fuck up, we had to start all over again.
And their process really wasn't what you'd expect.
The bomb that Dilla dropped on me was he made the music for Fantastic Volume 1 after the vocals were done. He would just do a hi-hat and you guys would just rhyme to the hi-hat.
Once they finished up their demo, Fantastic Volume 1, they pressed up 300 copies on cassette, selling them hand to hand, passing them to DJs at St. Andrew's Hall, and dropping them off at record stores. And eventually one of those tapes landed at the hands of Q-Tip.
I was on Lollapalooza tour in '94. This brother with a crazy big afro came by, and it was Amp Fiddler. He was playing keyboards for Funkadelic, and he was just like, yo, got this kid, I really want you there. You're gonna love him, he loves you. And he gave me his tape personally. I started listening to it in the back. I was listening to it and I was like, oh, what the fuck is this shit? It was a Slum Village demo.
Soon after that, Dilla joined the Umar, a new production collective alongside Q-Tip and Ali Shaheed Muhammad. And at this point, with his newfound fame brought by collaborating with Q-Tip, he landed placements with the likes of Busta Rhymes, Keith Murray, and The Pharcyde. And it was The Pharcyde's lab cab in California which made people stop and ask, Who is this guy? Tracks that he produced like Running and Drop were unlike anything else out there. And when Questlove first heard Bullshit live, he thought the kick drum must have been broken.
As I'm leaving the club, I'm hearing the vibration of the kick drum. It was the most life-changing moment I ever had. It sounded like the kick drum was played by like a drunk 3-year-old.
But it wasn't sloppy, it was completely deliberate. And by the late 90s, the Quiet Genius became the heartbeat of a brand new movement. At the famous Electric Lady Studios in New York, he linked up with Questlove, D'Angelo, Erykah Badu, and Common. And together they became the Soulquarians. And Dilla was helping to shape the sound of classic albums like Water for Chocolate, Mama's Gun, and Voodoo. However, in 2000, Dilla was diagnosed with lupus, a rare autoimmune disease that started attacking his body.
They said, your platelets are so low, we don't know how you're here.
Even as his health started to decline though, the music never stopped. He kept touring, kept producing, and even when he had to perform in a wheelchair, he refused to slow down. And in 2004, after an invite from his friend Common, he decided to move to LA.
Man, that was my roommate. We moved out to LA. We lived in the same crib. I wake up listening to JD beats. Don't get no better than that, man.
There he'd work from their small apartment, often alone making beats on his MPC, stockpiling loops, flipping obscure 45s, and quietly creating what would become Donuts. By 2005, as his health declined, Dilla was in hospital full-time. He could barely walk, his hands were cracking from treatment, but he 100% wasn't finished.
I had taken the turntable, his computer, and I took crates of records. And we didn't have any tables, so I'm borrowing the tray tables you eat your food on. And so we're lining them up, and I'm putting them all across the side of the bed. If I can roll the bed over to him, because the bed's on wheels, if he could reach his arms over, he could do something.
And with whatever energy he had left, he sequenced and edited what he'd already created. However, unlike the rumor that spread, Donuts wasn't made entirely in his hospital bed. The majority of it was actually made at home using a combination of tools. But for the first time, Pro Tools was at the center of his setup. Moving onto a DAW gave him so much more freedom when it came to sampling. He could zoom in on waveforms, time stretch without changing pitch, and slice samples with surgical precision. He could do things a sampler just simply couldn't. And like always, Dilla's mind allowed him to do things that other producers just wouldn't think of. Once he'd finished off the CD of beats back in hospital, he handed it off to Peanut Butter Wolf, who shared it with the rest of his team at Stone's Throw, and it landed in the hands of their designer Jeff Jank. And at that time, it was just a collection of short tracks, some of them only a minute long. It was Jank who suggested extending the tracks and put the idea to Dilla, who left it in his hands. So Jeff got to work carefully lengthening the tracks at home with only a 2-track to work with. No overhauls, just preserving the feel and allowing them to breathe a little bit longer. On February the 7th, 2006, Dilla's 32nd birthday, Donuts was released. 3 days later, Dilla passed away. But Donuts wasn't a sad farewell. It was defiant, joyful, weird, playful, angry, peaceful, sometimes all in the same 90 seconds.
I'm so proud of the life that he lived and the work that he did because it meant everything. He was very compassionate and selfless. The beauty of music is what kept him alive. It's what made his heart beat. It's what made him happy. It's what made him Dilla.
Since its release, Donuts has become a Rosetta Stone for producers, a masterclass in feel, texture, and restraint. And Dilla, he's your favorite producer's favorite producer. So how did he actually make these tracks? Let's break a couple down. So the first track that I wanted to get into off Donuts is Two Can Win. Which is one of my favorites off the tape. And for this track, there's only one sample, and that's the Silver's Only One Can Win.
Only one can win your love, and you must choose between the two.
And at first listen, it sounds like a really simple beat with just 2 or 3 chops. But the more you listen to it, the more you realize he's pulling from all over the record. It's the same chords, the same vocal hook, but different parts of the song. One version might have extra strings. Another might have layered harmonies or different instrumentation. So the sample's first sped up from about 77 BPM to 92, and then it's pitched up 3 semitones. And the first thing you really notice in Logic is the different lengths of the sample chops. And as it's laid out like this, you can hear all the different chops, but in the actual beat, it sounds like it's completely cohesive. And as for structure, there isn't really one at all. Sometimes he'll loop 2 bars, sometimes just 1. Then he'll stretch a section out longer. It's not like your traditional 8-bar A section, then a B section. It's like an A section, then a B, then a C, then a D, and so on. And I think a couple of the biggest takeaways from this beat are, don't just sample a snippet of a record, listen to the whole thing. Dilla didn't just stop at the intro or the breakdown, he knew these songs inside out, and because of that, he could find moments that other people missed. Also, don't be afraid to break structure. You don't have to stay locked into a 4 or 8-bar loop. Let the sample breathe and let it take you wherever it takes you. The second track I'm going to break down is Don't Cry, and he takes a completely different approach with this one. He uses a technique called micro chopping, and it's probably the best use of this I've ever heard. The track itself starts with like a 30-second sample of the Escorts' I Can't Stand to See You Cry. And he lets that play out so you get used to the original sample. But then he completely flips it. He takes the sample and dices it into tiny little pieces. He's pulling tiny vocal phrases, a snare, a guitar stab, just little fragments, and rearranging them into something new. And the final beat is just a masterpiece. If you've never tried micro chopping before, give it a go. Find a sample you like, chop it into tiny pieces, and completely reimagine it. And don't worry about making it sound clean or polished. Just trust your ear and go with what feels good. Now, if all this talk about sampling's got you inspired, you should check out our new bundle, the Full Platter. It's 3 sample packs for the price of 1. That's 30 full, soulful, vintage-inspired compositions, all with stems, giving you the ability to chop them, flip them, and make them your own. And it's just £25 instead of £75 you pay for the 3 packs on their own. But there's only 50 available, and half of those have already gone. And if you want to grab that, the link is in the description. Right, here's a few more takeaways I took from Donuts and Dilla in general. The first one is feel over perfection. Dilla's drums weren't clean, his loops weren't always tight, but they always felt incredible. He wasn't worried about quantizing or sticking to the grid. He was just searching for that perfect feel for the beat he was creating. So if your beat's a little loose, but it still moves you, don't try to fix it. Number 2, try and tell a story with your chops. Donuts plays like a whole journey. And that's partly because of how Dilla chopped it and arranged it. He didn't just loop the most obvious part. He explored the records, grabbed contrasting sections, different phrases, and he pieced them all together to say something. So when you're flipping a sample, try thinking like a storyteller. Where do you want this beat to start, and where do you want it to end? And finally, try something new every time you sit down to make music. There's no one Dilla formula. One day it might be smooth soul loops. The next micro chops for an old gospel record. Every beat was like an experiment. If you catch yourself reaching for the same drums every time, chopping your samples the same way, just switch it up. That's how you stay creative, and more importantly, how you stay inspired. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like this sort of thing, sample breakdowns, classic album deep dives, and making beats, then you should definitely come and join my new Discord community. It's full of friendly producers looking to collaborate, share music, ask questions, and it's the first place I post about our beat battles and free sample packs. So I'd love to see a few of you in there. And also don't forget to check out our sample pack bundle I mentioned earlier if you need any inspiration. Or just try out the free pack to get a taste, and links for both of those are in the description. And finally, if there's any artists or albums you want to see me break down next, let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.